So about 13 years ago, I was asked by Adult Protective Services in the town that we live in Virginia, to be appointed as a guardian and conservator for a woman in the area who was having difficulty managing her health care and finances. And I agreed to take on that court appointment, and for a woman named Karen, and she quickly became just my favorite person. She was so fun to talk to, but she was having difficulty. She probably had undiagnosed frontotemporal dementia and a little bit of mental health issues going on. And she was struggling in the community, going around to different stores, kind of hassling the store members, difficulty managing her own apartment. And eventually it was time to move her to a memory care facility. She was really young. She was in her early 60s. Finding that proper placement for her where she could be 62 but also get the support she needed was hard, but we got it done with a team that we put together. And I'm very proud of that because we were able to manage her, have her fulfill her best life. She got to keep participating in yoga, horseback riding. She even won awards in horseback riding. And when she got to a point where that was no longer possible, she transitioned to a smaller group home. And what I noticed throughout the process is a lady who was once very stressed out, very anxious, very concerned about how her life was going to go, those worries kind of fell away, and it got quiet for her, and she was able to have that peace and dignity towards the end of her life.
That's just a fantastic story. And I just want to welcome Valerie here today with us. This is Julie Steinbacher and Courtney Steinbacher with the Hey Woman podcast. And we've invited Valerie on today to talk about what she does as an elder law and estate planning attorney, and particularly the fiduciary services that they provide. And for all of you listening as caregivers out there, just having an understanding of what that involves, what it entails, that it's even offered or a possibility, and then also just to learn from like how you approach your job, because I think sometimes as caregivers we try to be all things to our loved ones, and you already talked about, and we're going to talk more about this, but you already talked about like that team of people, and so that's important. So Valerie, you mind introducing yourself, your law practice, and then we'll jump back into the fiduciary services.
Sure. I'm Valerie Geiger. I'm an elder law attorney. I've been in practice for 24 years, focusing solely in the elder law space. We do estate planning, special needs planning, long-term care planning, probate administration, guardianships and conservatorships, and of course our fiduciary support services.
So Valerie is my favorite type of attorney. For those of you who don't know, I'm also an elder law attorney for about the same amount of time, and it's really a privilege to be able to walk people through this, second half of life and whatever comes in their way across that journey. And having professional guidance is something that we don't always think about, but something that we definitely should think about.
So for those of us that are not attorneys, our listeners, myself, can you break down kind of what are fiduciary services? Like, so if I called a law firm and I said I needed that, what does that even mean?
Sure, I'm going to give the typical lawyer answer as it depends.
Great, we love that.
But it could be asking us to be appointed as a healthcare agent under a power of attorney, or it could be a court appointment as a guardian, and that's just managing someone's healthcare. It could be trustee of a trust, a typical revocable trust, a trustee of a special needs trust. It could be just executor under their last will and testament. It could be an agent under a financial power of attorney. Any of those jobs that you need to fill when you're meeting with your estate planning attorney and you need to put a name down, our firm can act in those capacities.
And yes, just so everybody understands that fiduciary is really kind of a generic term that covers all of those things. And as an attorney, one of the things that's important to us is that you often have a duty. So whether you're that power of attorney or the executive, the duty to act in that person's best interest. So just as a simple example, If you're somebody's power of attorney, you can't, and their will says everything goes equally to their kids, and you're one of those kids, you can't decide, oh, mom really loved me the most and I get all the money. That would be a breach of fiduciary duty. And so I think that term fiduciary is something people are afraid of, but it's definitely something that we all need. We need people who are able to act in our best interest when we're not able to. And I think many of the caregivers that are listening, you're doing that. You're doing that, whether it's written down. There's lots of reasons that it should be written down. But I think today's episode is really about what are those services, how can that professional help, and what is it really that maybe you can glean off of it to understand your role and not having to be all things.
Yeah, so we, once we are identified in a document, we give out kind of a letter of intent, if you will, where they can complete all their preferences. But I also then start talking to them about putting a team in place. And the team, we would be one component of the team, the fiduciary and or legal kind of approach to their situation. But I also highly suggest they use geriatric care management. I think they've rebranded to aging life care professionals now. I keep saying geriatric care management.
I'm the same. It's hard. When you learn something,
Yeah.
it's hard to unlearn it.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like it really fits. But anyway,
Yeah.
so, and then if they don't have a financial advisor, maybe we need to start thinking about that, because we would probably use a financial advisor on the team. And I would rather them be a part of that selection process. So it's really creating the team. And it doesn't have to be immediately upon signing the documents, but we need to keep thinking about that as things progress, as life carries on, who's going to be on our team.
Yeah, and I think for everybody listening, you have to understand that everybody needs this team. Like if you're a caregiver and you're a team of one, you can't be all these things. So like at my law office, we're often helping people with elder care navigation, which is the same thing. We're helping them put that team of people together because it's hard to advocate for good care and know how to pay all the bills and, figure out how these finances are supposed to be invested. That's why you need a team helping you to do this.
No, and I think what's really important for the listeners is that it's never too early to start to create your team, right? So I think sometimes people get, pigeonholed into they have to make a team because they have to make decisions very quickly because things are changing. There's a diagnosis. It's never too early to make your team. So talk to me, Valerie, about like if I was a client and I came to your office and I signed up for fiduciary services. So you send me my letter of intent, but talk to me a little bit about like what that says, what preferences could I even have?
So I jokingly, but need to know things like your shoe size. Often I get cases from, the county asking us to help, and I don't know the person's shoe size, or their undergarment size, or what their preference for an undergarment is, or what they like to wear to sleep, which are kind of, it sounds ridiculous, but it's important, right? Everybody has their own preferences on these things, as well as, religious preferences, food preferences. Like if you love chocolate milkshakes, and we're at that kind of phase of life, you're getting a chocolate milkshake every day.
Right.
Have what you love, and why not, right? So,
and the systems out there aren't always set up to deal with people's preferences.
That's right.
And that's why they really need an advocate.
That's right. It's critical. I was thinking while you were talking about, having that geriatric care manager or just anybody on the team with kind of knowledge. If someone transitions to some sort of residential setting, they're required to have these quarterly meetings and go over plans of care. And it's a different world, it's a different language. And having that team of people that know that language already shortcuts it for you because you're learning on the fly while trying to advocate. And it's kind of difficult. It's similar to parents with special needs children going into an IEP or an individualized education plan. This is a different language that we're learning. And it's affecting your loved one.
It is. And, I think the preference is, lots of times when we're in this or you're talking about caregiving, people talk about big picture preferences, right? Like they're like, oh, you have to sit down and plan your funeral. And that definitely can be a part of this. That's something that not something people want to plan too early, although, you should always think about it. But, there are small things. I think about Nan, and she would be so excited when she got the right nightgown. Like you had to go buy the right nightgowns. And, we knew what they were as family caregivers, but also towards the end when she had some behaviors and stuff like that, you walk in there with a Reese or a Hershey bar with almonds, and it really could change. We go from throwing shoes to very happy with our chocolate bar, right? So, we've put that together. If you're a family caregiver listening, you can go on the planningandprotecting.com website and print that out and write it down, and it just sits in your loved one's room. And that's a great first step for any of the family caregivers listening. It doesn't negate the need for professional help, or if the fiduciary services can be really important for solo agers as well if you don't have a family member to a point.
Exactly. I even down to what music you like, because that's so important. And I always think about the music I listen to, which is more on the hip hops. And I'm thinking of what that would look like later in my life. But what music or what TV, if I'm older and I need assistance, I want to have the Housewives on, right? And my other lady that I'm taking care of right now, she prefers QVC. That's calming to her. So what is it that's on TV, music that could really bring, take that stress down of being in a different environment?
Yeah. And for your clients, whether they come to you or they start kind of putting their team together, what are some questions, or how do you decide if it's a good team, or this is the person that I should use because they'll make decisions on my behalf?
Yeah, so we work with multiple different professionals in all different topics. So like I had mentioned, the aging life care professionals, they all have personalities and cover different geographic areas. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at financial advisors and their approach. Realtors, maybe they have a realtor they've already talked to about their home, and that's who they want to use later if they need to sell their house. All those we also use this other service. We're very blessed in our area of having lots of services of a friendly visitor. So this isn't someone who's maybe advocating for healthcare, but enhancing it on the weekends, nights. And I had a lady forever who, she was young as well. She had a stroke and she really needed nursing care. But it was really important to her to get her Christmas card list out the door. But
that would be important to me.
Yeah.
No, I mark that down. Well, go ahead.
So we had, she did many things, but one of the, at Christmas time, it was getting the wrapping paper, getting the Christmas card list together, and getting that out the door. That was important to her. So those kinds of things need to be, spelled out, or she was able to communicate that, so that was easy. But those kinds of things are really important. I'm also someone who their nails need to be done. If my nails aren't done, it's gonna stress me out.
Oh, that's you, Cor.
Yeah, that is me. And it's funny, we talk about that and we can laugh, but things that are important to you now in life, they don't become not important to you just because you're aging, right? So and I think so often, we talk to caregivers and family caregivers and different things like that, and they're like, I can't possibly do all of these things. And I think that can be totally valid, right? As you as one person can't do it. And that's why it has to be a team of people. No, I want my manicure, and I want my lady, you know what I mean? I trust her with my life.
Exactly.
Well, I think too, we have to understand that as people are aging and they have some sort of a disease process, they're already losing things. They're already giving up things. There's already so much loss. So it's so important to hold on to the things we can, and whether they can be exactly the same or slightly different. Again, this Hey Woman podcast is dedicated to my mom. And shopping was a big deal to my mom my whole life. There was nothing, this was back in the days of the malls where you'd go to the mall, and spend all day. And there was nothing like therapy, retail therapy with my mom. And, the Christmas, and it was a big deal to buy stuff for people at Christmas. And so, even if she couldn't go to a store, how do we hold on to the essence of that? which is, shopping online with, Amazon up or, LL Bean up on the screen, and letting her still have choices and then get the packages. And then even if she couldn't wrap them, paying somebody to wrap them in front of her. Like, I could have taken all those gifts home and wrapped them, but that ruined the whole experience for her.
Right.
Instead, I paid one of my nieces, who was in high school at the time, to do it with her. Like, and so my mom got to touch it and feel it. And, at Christmas, we did have to, re-exchange some gifts.
Well, she thought that your sizes should go in your birth order.
So if you're older, you have a bigger size.
Right. So the fact that my brother, who's one of the youngest, was 5'11", and my cousin Abby, who was older, was 5'2". Like, Abby should have the bigger size because she's older. So there was some exchanging that needed to be done on Christmas Eve, but it all worked out.
But the thing is that the essence of that was able to be saved for her. And I think that that's what's so important for people to be understanding. I also think from the professional point of view, I want to go back to your story in the beginning, because there's a really important point for everybody to hear. And I know that in my job, people reel against it, but I think they need to explore it. And that is moving somebody into a community. Mm-hmm. And I know there's people listening thinking, no, I'm going to, do everything I can so my loved one doesn't have to go to a community. And what I want people to understand is that you should explore it. One, you have a duty to explore it if you're the caregiver, because if you get sick, that's going to be the answer. Many times, other people who might be on the care team may not be able to give more. And so we don't want to be standing in a hospital, or you're at the hospital and we're struggling for what facility is it. We want to explore what facilities are out there and what would be our choice. But I also want to encourage people to be open to that, because communities provide community. They provide social connectedness. And if we go into the blue zones, we talk about longevity. We talk about what works in other countries than the U.S. is that they don't isolate their elders, and that people are able to continue living. And so I want everybody to really think about, not to be no, my loved one's never going to a nursing home. One, we have to expand it. It's not just nursing homes. There's all kinds of different communities out there. There's smaller group homes. There's different levels of care. There's memory units. But can you kind of go back and talk about, the individual and what you think that community did for her versus and please know it had to be hard. She probably was saying to you, I want to stay home. That's not unusual. That's our safe place. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. She was living in her own condo, but it was becoming unsafe because she was so capable. She was going towards the metro and heading downtown, and that made me really nervous, amongst other things. So we decided to transition her to a memory care facility, and the reason we picked that particular community is because the population at that moment was super active. Like I said, she was very young. She was on the more capable side, and what it did was a couple things. One, it took the pressure off of her of having to manage her own space, right? And so that pressure, because just doing the laundry and things like that was very stressful to her. And it also created some confidence in her because she was more capable. She was leading the community activities. Okay. So she was setting them up. She was working with the other residents to play games or whatever the social activity was of that day. And so it was great for a period of time. And she was there for years. At some point, and this is my assessment of her, was that activity, that bustle that was really appropriate for her in the beginning, actually then started to become too much for her. Mm-hmm. My theory is that it was a lot of processing for the brain because there's so many sounds, people are moving around, there's activity, that it was actually agitating her. Mm-hmm. And she was getting aggressive, which she wasn't before. So I had made the decision to transition her then from that community to a smaller group home, and it was much quieter. Her behavior started to calm down. And she was able to get a lot more close one-on-one attention, and that resolved a lot of that agitation. So, and also I want to just add, just because your loved one moves to some sort of residential community setting doesn't mean you stop caregiving. You
Right.
go into there, you're one, an advocate like we talked about, but two, you can participate and do all the things that you would have done in the home setting there in that community. You don't have to stop participating as a caregiver. You're just getting a little assistance or relief in some situations. So.
Well, and honestly, at the end of the day, I know, like, for me, it allowed me to just actually visit my mom versus like stopping at her house and like having to care for that house, like making sure the laundry was done, making sure she had enough groceries. Like, so like before my mom transitioned, all of my caregiving was about caregiving for that home and everything that was necessary for that, when I often didn't have time just to sit down and talk to her. Versus when she was in the community, what I was able to do is like sit down and we'd watch TV together, we'd chit chat about, you know, finances and, you know, share some ice cream. But I didn't have to be worried about so many things. And so that it really upped our interaction. I'd also say, like, it's not unusual, you know, so before I was an attorney, I was a social worker. And people would come into a nursing home that I was at that time. They're like, my loved one is doing so good. Like, they don't need to be here. And I'd have to say to them, just like you were talking about with your individual, it's the structured environment that really enhances their capabilities. But if the person's then discharged and you take that structure away, they're going to kind of relapse. And so, you know, it sounds like when she would move, she was able to flourish in that structured environment. And I just want people to know that, because sometimes people are like, oh, she's doing so good, she doesn't need to be there. Yeah, discharge her, him or her, and take them out of that structure, and you're going to see kind of the same thing, because they're only able to deal with it, you know, such a level. I also think your story is really important for people to hear, that like she was great there, and then that place no longer fulfilled her needs, and you were able to find another place that fit her where she was in that disease process and her own aging journey. And so I think sometimes people are hesitant to make that change. I know at the facility that I own, one of the things that we try to do is even achieve that within the same facility, you know, by changing people's rooms, changing. One of the reasons that we just recently at Nipponos Valley Village added on a memory care unit is because we didn't want to lose those people, you know, because change is always hard and going to a different facility, but it's necessary because it's that disease has progressed to a different level, and that community may not be able to meet the needs of that level. And rather than getting into a situation where you're constantly having to advocate against a system that's not able to provide what your loved one needs, it's better to kind of see what else is out there.
I think this, you know, also highlights the need to talk to a professional. So, you know, you do fiduciary services lots of times for people who don't have anybody else, but it also, you know, if you're a caregiver that's listening to this and you're like, I still want to stay involved, that's still a really good reason to reach out to an elder law attorney, because when you're in the thick of it and your emotions are driving some of your decisions, and that's not a bad thing, that's kind of rightly so, right? Like, you're emotionally invested, whether this person is your parent or grandparent. We don't just, like, check our emotional baggage and we're like, oh, like, we caregive now, and like the past, you know, 20, 30, 40 years of all of this stuff just goes away, kind of just comes with you. And so you may not even know that, like, one, you should be changing somebody from one facility to another, that that's an option, that can be done. How can that be done? And that's why, like, leaning into a professional to help you kind of see it a little bit further out from a less emotional place is helpful, because both perspectives are good, right? But that's why it's a team of people, because you can't do this all by yourself. So often, you know, family caregivers are navigating their own emotions about becoming a caregiver, especially if it's a child caring for a parent. You know, there's that role reversal that we talk about. We also on here, you know, talk about I could say things to Nan that you never could.
Oh, no.
And so like I would go,
Send in a grandchild.
right. And like nobody was throwing a shoe at me, but like
Yeah.
she may have thrown one at you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's where,
Yeah, especially your sister, Steph.
oh, Steph could say whatever she wanted to her. It was fine.
It was just fine.
It was fine.
If I had said that, I was like, Steph, you have to tell her, you know.
Well, but also vice versa. Like, right, with Nan had professional caregivers, which were very necessary. But, she wasn't using her walker. She decided that she didn't have drop foot anymore, and she didn't need to use her walker, and it was in her way. And so, the professional caregiver did what she could, but like Nan was just stubborn. And so I just went over and sat her down and I said, I don't have time to take you to the emergency room if you fall. I was like, so like the choice is yours. I said, but I'm not taking you. And like the professional caregiver was like, oh my God. I was like, no, I would take her. Like I was like, no. Like if she falls, please call me. Like I will take her to the
Play along with me.
Please no, I won't like put her in the ambulance by herself. But somebody had to say something like that to her.
Yes.
And that's where I think the balance of the family caregivers working with the professionals is just as important as, having professional help with somebody that spent their life like learning the ins and outs of the system, because it's constantly changing, which I think is really important as well.
It's interesting, when you're in law school and you think about being an elder law attorney, I think, we're thinking about trusts, wills, those documents. But yet, I think what's happened with elder law is that because we're small businesses mostly, or medium-sized businesses across the country, we see this need out there that there really isn't anybody who can be the quarterback or the coach of this like aging journey to say, here's what's ahead, here's how you interact with the healthcare industry, within the financial industry. And so I think it's a really interesting thing how that's developed. And I've often thought about like, why is that? And for me, I don't have a better answer than we're just filling the void that we see. I'm just interested. Do you have a better answer for that? Or what do you think? Like, why are we needed? Because I bet you a lot of listeners are thinking, I've never thought of calling an elder law attorney for what these people are talking about. And yet I think that's, for many, one of the best calls they could make.
Sure. Why are we needed? It depends.
She's good at that attorney answer.
On the family situation, so it could be someone who the industry has dubbed a solo ager, and they just don't have that team put together yet. It could be a married couple that they have friends and family, but maybe they're about the same age as them, and maybe no children, so they're looking around and thinking, and so maybe we're the successor, right? So maybe the family is the first name in the line, but maybe we're the backup in case they're of a similar age. It could be family dynamics. So they could have children, but they know that if two of them kind of have to talk about things, that things are going to get fired up pretty quickly.
I always tell people, if your kids aren't getting along now, they're not going to get along in that.
No, this is going to exacerbate it. Because whatever that is, that this
Some
is
people
going to
just
be
say,
used.
well, they have to. They don't actually.
I know.
They could litigate.
I love when they take that gamble. Because I was like, all right, I'll put it in the document. But so it will just depend on those. Maybe it's the amount of money, and they want a professional approach to managing their affairs. I have a lady who she was married, kids, the husband passed away, kids are a bit estranged, and part of her asset structure is like a gas station. So it's land with somebody renting like a gas station on top of it, and there's rental units, and there's a lot going on. So she wants kind of a professional touch to that situation. So it just depends.
Yeah. And I think, again, for the people listening, even if you have a perfect family situation, you don't know what the journey is going to look like and even what the possibilities are. So consulting a professional elder law attorney to kind of find out the documents, what are those decisions. And I would say to everybody, the sooner that's in place, the better. because we want the loved one or the older person, their capacity, that we really know what they want and really are able to capture those preferences. So I think that that's important. And for many people, they're not used to talking about those things. So, my kids are, after my mom passed away, one of my kids said to me, "Mom, not every family is as used to talking about, death and dying as you are." I would have liked them to say that as we are, but they said as you are. And so, it's just, so I think some of, what happens, we've seen so many things. I also think, where we live, in the communities that we serve, and I'm sure the same is true for you, we also know what facilities do the best job. We know what facilities do the best job for what diagnosis. There's just really important things. People talk about nursing homes, assisted living, but that's just a generic term too. Like, what care happens in those facilities really can depend on, like, I can tell you at where I live, where's the best place to go if you fall and broke a hip? That's different than what happens if you have dementia.
That's right.
And so it's not whether places are good or bad or whether I like them. It's that what place really does a good job with this diagnosis, which I think is so important. What we don't want is families, all of a sudden your loved one's at the hospital and the discharge planner at the hospital comes in with here's your list of places, and you're looking at a sheet that has rating on it and deciding whether or not your loved one is going to be able to rehab to get back home, where they're going to spend their final days. It's such a huge decision. And that piece of paper is, practically useless, to be honest with you. I do think there's statistics. I always suggest to people, look at Medicare.gov. There are things there that I think are really important, like if I go into a facility for something that's rehab, how likely am I to get discharged? Those statistics are out there, and they vary. But that's nothing like walking into a place and feeling the energy and what's going on there, and is the staff caring? And so I just think that that's so important for people to understand. If you're struggling and you feel overwhelmed, there's help.
There's help and there's choice. What you've identified, and I'm huge on, is there's choice. You're in that critical moment of the discharge of the hospital. They hand you that paper, but you don't have to go to any of those places. You could pick your own place. You could,
right.
Maybe your loved one's better for an acute rehab rather than a more traditional rehab setting. And people don't know, so they go by the advice of the discharge planner, who's got how many on her caseload. And so knowing that you have choices in that moment, I feel like a lot of people don't know that, and it gets me kind of fired up.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that. Like, I want to jump out of my seat, but Court's sitting here, so I have to stay here. But I agree with that, because my mom, she was in a hospital, and I visited her every single day, even though the hospital was 45 minutes to an hour away from me, every single day. And I came in on one Friday, and they're like, "Oh yeah, your mom's being discharged to a nursing home," and I was like, "Oh, actually, she's not." And they're like, "Oh, yes, she is." And I was like, because I want her to go to an acute rehab, because I know statistically she has a 25, maybe 33% chance of rehabbing out of a nursing home. That doesn't mean that a nursing home isn't a great place. It means they give 1 hour of therapy a day, right? And an acute rehab is going to give about 3 hours. And I know my mom's goal was to get back to the community where she was at, which was at that point in time, she lived there for 8 years. It was her home. And I knew that she had a better choice. So if I said, okay, and she was discharged to a nursing home, her likelihood of ever getting back to that assisted living just plummeted. And it wasn't about what my mom could do. And I knew that my mom was very, very dedicated to working hard and doing the rehab. I mean, she may not have been nice to me during all of it, but she was going to try and do it. She was very motivated to get back to what was her home at that time. But that one little decision, and you're right, they didn't even offer acute rehab.
Yeah,
and in fact,
you don't know,
then they wouldn't help me. I was like, I know exactly where I want her to go. Here's the name of the discharge planner. And they did nothing. And so, it's hard, because then my mom's also yelling at me, because now she has to stay in the hospital another day. So, and that's not helpful for her either, because she's not getting any rehab. She's just laying in a bed. But, in that circumstance, I was able to reach back to my office and use my own services and say, hey, I need a discharge to this facility. Can you call, the admissions coordinator? And was able to get my mom there. And she very much was able to come back. And that shifted the outlook. And so I think this is also important. There's so much that people just don't know that gravely affects what that journey is going to look like.
Well, and I think, right now, we'd be remiss not to say, like, in the age of AI, right? And like I'm spending so much time, trying to figure out like how to get our firm to show up on AI. Because the reality of it is that, I tried almost 15 different prompts. And I would say about half the time, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever you're using, is telling people not to go to an elder law attorney.
Oh,
That's true. There's a huge bias.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it all depends on how you're asking the question. And so we're asking caregivers who are stressed, who are overwhelmed, solo agers who are scared, to ask a computer a question, and it's pulling information it thinks is relevant. It's not like the fault of the robot, right? But it's also not the fault of the prompter, right?
Right.
So like it's like a weird situation where there's no real fault, but but it's a totally different way to get information out there. And so it's such a big decision that you really should just go to an attorney, because what AI is never going to be able to do is it's never going to be able to tell you what the feeling is when you walk into a community, right?
That's right.
So like you can in this age of like DIY with AI, right? Like you can have it will give you a list of questions to go to a facility and to ask, and that is an excellent starting point, right? But it's not going to be but if you ask it to compare the two, it's not going to be able to tell you which one feels more comfortable, which one has a nursing staff that's better for your diagnosis, because some of that stuff isn't in a statistic that's mineable by an AI. It's 20 years of experience from a law firm, from placing clients there with that exact diagnosis and knowing that they've had a successful outcome. It also really depends on what the goal of the person is, which I think comes all the way back to the beginning with your story, which is you sat down with a client, you knew what that client wanted, and then you were able to advocate for that. And that's just not something AI or do it yourself is like ever going to do, and is really hard for a family caregiver to do, as they're so emotionally invested in what's happening, because lots of times they're making decisions with incomplete information, which is so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important topic and episode for people to understand. Before we close, Valerie, do you have any parting thoughts for our listeners that are, a lot of our listeners are really struggling with caregiving and really want the best for their loved ones, and, might be overwhelmed and need some help. Any thoughts?
Create a team. I think that's kind of been the theme, and even if it's just to talk to each of those professionals, maybe have a consult just to see what it is. Like if you're even nervous, you don't want to really jump in because you're not sure. Have a consult, go to one of their seminars if they're having seminars, and just see the person, see what they can offer, because you don't have to do it alone. And there's so much to know, and maybe you don't need the team forever. Maybe it's just to get up and started, but just so you don't have to, a shortcut of really educated people that can kind of help you on your journey.
And if any of our listeners are in the Virginia area, what areas does your law firm serve, and how would people kind of get in touch with you?
So we, the DMV, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, we primarily focus on Northern Virginia, Alexandria, Fairfax, Prince William, Loudoun, but we service, because of where we are, we service all 3 states. So we're able to help and connect with the right individuals.
Great. And so your firm is listed on our planningandprotecting.com website. So if you need contact information, or if you're unfortunately not from the DMV area, you can find an elder law attorney that kind of subscribes to the same thought process that Valerie does today, to find somebody to help you in your situation in your state. But we really want to thank you for listening. If this is your first episode with us, we thank you for joining in. There's lots of other episodes on topics that were kind of touched on today that can be great resources. You can find them on planningandprotecting.com. You can also follow along on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at the Hey Woman Podcast. And we thank you for listening.